Hi guys, Happy New Year. Hope everyone's really well. Hope you had a good break and got to spend some time with your family. And yeah, I'm sure most people around the world will be happy to see the back of 2020. Hopefully it's a bit better this year. I personally got to get away for a week, which I don't usually do at Christmas, and popped up to Raglan, which, if you guys don't know, is probably one of the best point breaks, if not the best point breaks in the country. Didn't score amazing waves, but got to have a surf, and yeah, it was really funny because bumped into some people in the water who actually recognised me from the video. So the guy, I think, I'm pretty sure he's called Haggis. So like a couple of guys up there were like really welcoming and told me where to sit and sort of shouted me into a few waves and stuff. So thanks guys, really appreciate that. And yeah, Raglan's a good little place, and travelling the surrounding areas was really good. And yeah, if you get a chance to go and check out the point breaks there when it's working, it's a really good spot. The locals might not appreciate any extra people up there, but it's a pretty well-known spot, so I don't think anyone will mind that getting mentioned. So yeah, thanks to the guys that I did meet up there. It's really nice to you know, sort of, I'm not used to rocky spots, and I crawled in over these rocks and asked one guy where to get in, and he was really nice. And then yeah, getting out in the water a bit nervous and not knowing where to sit, and yeah, someone going, "Oh hey, are you that guy from the video review?" I was like, "Oh yeah, how's it going?" So yeah, that was really nice. So if you're out there guys, thanks very much. Another thing, if you guys like what I do, it'd be really appreciated if you could subscribe and like. Subscribe would be really good at the minute, and if you've got any friends that you convince to subscribe just for the sake of subscribing, that'd be great, because I'm sitting on like nearly 950 subscribers, and I'd love to get to 1,000 just as a bit of a, you know, as a bit of a personal landmark for myself. So if you guys that do like my stuff can rally and get 2 or 3 mates each to flick on, that would be really appreciated. I'd really appreciate people doing that for me. Yeah, so into the new year, and just I haven't had this super long. I've actually had a few rides on it, and I've sold it to a guy that I know that I've swapped boards with and sold boards to before. So whilst I've still got it, I thought I'd do a review. This is the Lost V3 Rocket. And I'll try and do a little bit of an overview on the Rocket series and the carbon wrap tech. I could go on forever though, so I'll try my best not to, but I probably will, you know what I'm like. So the Rocket's got a lot of lineages. The original Rocket was around, what's the Rocket Redux movie now? What's one of the best surf movies? 5.5, 19 and a quarter, Rocket Redux. That's the RNF, sorry, that's the RNF Redux. And that's the board. The movie's 5.5, 19 and a quarter Redux, and the guys are all riding around those fish, but you also see them ride some Lost Rockets. Sorry, I was getting a bit confused there, but yeah. So you'll see a lot of Lost Rocket riding from like, must be 15 years ago now, but the boards were so ahead of the time. They were basically what the modern hybrids are. So yeah, the Rocket's got a massive lineage. There's the original Rocket, which was more of a fuller nose. I think it was the original, you know, the original outlines were like trying to take a slightly fishy nose and keep a little bit of a parallel outline and make a really fast small wave board that still performed. The original ones were a sort of bit more of a hyper extended tail rocker, so they really needed a good surfer to get the absolute most out of them, but they had all that paddle power, and you could ride them in a short package, and it was one of the groundbreaking boards of the short wide era, short wide and flat rocker era. And then they went to the V2, which was they just pulled it in a little bit, and the tail rocker wasn't that extreme, but the nose rocker got I think flattened down and then changed a few features, and that's got a little bit of a different tail. So this like a, it's almost like a rounded pin with the wings on it that almost makes it like almost like a diamond. It's really like someone's made a rounded pin with another tail added to it, kind of thing. These wings just add area to your back foot, which adds some speed. So that's pretty much a signature across the Rocket series. More recently, they've come up with the Rocket Redux, which is I've got a review on, and that's basically a more modernized version of the old original Rocket, but it's just made in a little bit wider to make it in 2 sets of dimensions. They made the volumes a bit bigger. They've made it a really nice low fast modern, really like modern rocker, and that's a great hybrid board. And the V3, I think the V3 was made as a more versatile, slightly more high performance, and personally I would say more of the more of the sort of small but really medium to slightly bigger wave range, so it's really a daily driver. But interesting thing is, it just shows how good some of the old lost back catalogue is, and how ahead of the time they were with boards, and how some of the features of the older boards might still suit you better for your needs possibly than a modern model, depending on whether there's a improved modern model or whether the original had some attributes that are actually better for what you're looking for. So it does add to my claim that it also makes the lost range very difficult to pick exactly what you want with all the minute changes, but it's also difficult to pick a bad board, is the good thing about it. So onto the V3. This one is 6.3. That's free. My accent's not very good with those. So 6.3, 20 3/4, 2 3/4, and 40 litres of volume. So the attributes that would make the V3 different, and again maybe make this more of a back catalogue board possibly more suitable for you, is this rocket has not got a wide point significantly forward, and the outline of the nose is quite a lot tighter than some of the boards would be now. But this would have been wide for its time, and then the middle is slightly narrower than some of like the Quiver Killer series, the Quivering Psycho Killer series would be naturally, and it's probably got a little bit more nose rocker and possibly a little bit more tail rocker than some of that series. So it's kind of like a slightly older series board. You know, in a way, it's almost like if you looked at the Firewire Dominator, the original one. When that came out, the nose on it was like a large hybrid nose. Now that nose is like, I wouldn't touch a nose much bigger than that on what would be one of the more performance boards for me, because unless you're a really good surfer, you just don't need it. So the good thing about this is the wide point not being too far back, and the bit of extra nose rocker and the bit of extra tail rocker and the little bit less width actually makes this a really good performing daily driver, whereas in previous times it might have been considered like a step down or just a really good range of waves. I think now this would be a good fairly performance hybrid for waves from probably 2 foot all the way up to like well overhead, and like I say, it differs a little bit from some of the Killer series because it's not as parallel in the outline, it's not as wide a nose, and it's not quite as flat a rocker. I personally like the Quiver and Psycho Killer series myself because it suits me well, because that nose, that extra nose and the wide point slightly forward sort of suits my style and my lack of snappy turns and my front-footedness. Whereas this, if you're a good surfer and you can surf off the back foot, I think you'd get more out of this. And one of the great things about this board is I think this outline with the nose combined with this double step rocket tail. It's, you know, you got 2 steps and then your little wing here. I think it really helps to give the performance and the rocker that will give you confidence in a decent size wave, but the actual area that's sat underneath your back foot will actually still give you some of that rocket speed. So I would say that it's really hard when you start comparing across the board. So this particular board is probably catching waves and is easy to ride. There's not masses of difference or masses of negatives over the Killer series. It's just getting a little bit more out of your wave if you want to perform a bit more, but it does carry really good speed even in a smaller wave. Whereas so say you're something like your Uber XL, that does carry okay speed, but that's got I think that's got a bit shorter wave range for me. It's a squash tail, and it's probably going to need to be chest to head high for it to work in our local waves because they're not super fast waves. But then when it gets to a decent bit overhead, or it gets a fair bit overhead, it's probably going to struggle. Whereas this, I think you'd probably be able to ride that 2 foot chest even below, and then you're probably able to push it up into overhead as well, because it's just it's quite natural to ride. It's got that confidence inspiring feel. If you were going into a surf trip in shortboard waves and you had this as the only board you had with you, and it was volume volume and length correct for your weight, and you weren't riding massively over volume, I ride quite a long way over volume, then I think you'd feel very confident in a really wide range of waves. And I quite often hear that feedback on this board, you know, even though it's a back catalogue board, technically it's still available. And I think a lot of people choose to buy this board because they hear such good things about. I've heard ups and downs from different sides depending on how you sway with the Killer series versus the Rocket series and the other side of it, but I don't think I've ever heard anyone say bad things about the V3. I think everyone who's had a V3 that I've spoke to seems to really rate it. So yeah, so it does carry really good speed. It's quite easy to duck dive because the nose isn't too big. The rail's kind of sort of it's low but fairly full here. It's probably a bigger rail than it's probably a chunkier rail than the Uber XL. And then it's still carrying moderate, it's like reasonable volume under your back foot, but yeah, just with that tail shape you can see that you're going to get that drive under your fin area, and then this double step is going to give you that extra grip and performance, and you've got a little bit of hyperextension off this tail rocker, which is just going to give you a bit of extra performance. I got this one because I wanted to try an EPS epoxy construction again, but in a board that was at the slightly bigger end of the wave range. So when I say big, I'm really talking medium. I'm talking like 3, 4, 5 foot waves, which would be like sort of chest to overhead, because I tend to prefer a PU poly, like a traditional polyester board over an epoxy. So I actually wanted to try an EPS epoxy in one of the good modern technologies that's actually made for that wave range, and this is actually really good. It would give you the confidence across a good wave range, which is great. Like I say, I've sold this one to my mate because I still prefer, like, I took my Quiver Killer up to Raglan, and that was my 6. I've got a slightly short one and a slightly narrow one that I bought that was someone else's custom, and that is that's like 38.5 litres, which is actually low for me, but it paddled well, it duck dives well, it's really confidence inspiring in waves, it carves well, it grips on the tail really well, and again I just slightly prefer the PU poly when the waves get bigger. I just feel like they sit a bit lower and they're a bit more confidence inspiring, but this was like very close, to be honest. So yeah, if you were looking for a board to cover like quite a wide range of waves and you don't want to have lots of a quiver of boards, this could be a really good board to sit above something like a puddle jumper or like a mega groveler like the beanbag, and then you could just take this for everything else. And then if it gets too big for this board, you're probably really looking at a step up really. And realistically, a lot of people probably aren't going to be comfortable in the waves that outgun this board. Although maybe you are, like, you know, I think the guy who's buying this has got like a groveler, and then he'd have something 2 or 3 boards similar to this through the middle range in Daily Driver, and then at that top end he's got like a rock up, I believe, and the rock up's like the, you know, lost sort of step up semi gun that'll still turn, or, you know, you get like a mini driver or something. They'd be very confidence inspiring too. So yeah, sorry to waffle about the other boards so much. So this is, as you can see, this is more pulled in the nose, and the tail is quite rocket though. The tail's still quite wide, but it steps away with those double steps. You can see the rockers probably slightly more, definitely a lot more than the Rocket Redux. The Rocket Redux would probably develop a little more natural speed early because it's just a low rockered, wider nose, wide point forward, more parallel outline planing board. But this actually does the best of all worlds quite well. Again, so if you're just looking for one board, this paddles well, it gets into waves early, the rocker gives you some confidence, you can get in the pocket quite aggressively, and then this tail is still delivering you the speed that you'd be looking for from a rocket type board, but then the double step gets it out of your way, and if you're good at getting your foot right over the back, then you're going to be able to probably hit the lip like you might want to. Another thing that's different is this is basically a very deep single concave all the way through the board. A lot of the other boards in the series would probably be single double V or single double. I think the Rocket series is generally more focused on a single. I'm pretty sure the Redux was single virtually all, if not all, of the way through the board. This is a very aggressive single, so I got the impression that there's elements of the design that just really help it do everything. I think that big long single gives it a lot lift and glide that you might not otherwise get out of this outline and rocker, and then that melded together with the outline and the rocker is giving you the performance without losing you the speed. So it's actually a very clever board, and again, like I say, it's going to cover you for quite a large wave range. So this is why I wanted to review it, just to again reiterate to people that there's a lot of boards that aren't the latest and greatest that could still potentially be better for you, and then there's some boards that have been superseded, but there still can be elements of the older boards that might suit you better than what you're looking at, because quite frankly the way water flows and the way waves behave and stuff hasn't really changed, but the way boards are made is different. But if you're looking at boards from the last 5 or 10 years, there's not that many boards that would drastically have outperformed the one that was right for you 5 or 6 years ago or 10 years ago. It's more about getting the right board. They might have made refinements, but those refinements might just not suit you. So I know it's very hard and very confusing and complicated, but if you know how to pick the eyes out of it, you can get a board that would suit you for everything. And I think this is very good daily driver, one board quiver for quite a wide range. As most people say, I don't really believe in a one board quiver, because there's no way I can ride this when the waves are that big in our local wave. And that's probably right for most of the waves I'm comfortable with height size wise. You could take one of these to Indo, as long as you're not riding, I don't know, 6 foot plus Indo waves, you're probably fine on this. So yeah, and then say this is a carbon wrap technology. So it's EPS core, so it's an expanded polystyrene core, which are the lighter ones, which is, I believe, the cores. Some of the cores and the lightness of the cores of the EPS can be the things that can be giving some of the negative effects that some people don't like. Some people find epoxies too light, too poppy, too corky. After making my own boards and making my boards with the traditional PU blank and epoxy resin, and them coming out a little bit heavier than a lot of these very modern, very light EPSs, I don't find many of the negatives in my own boards that I make, because I think the weight is actually the main problem. A lot of them, I think some of these boards are actually not quite heavy enough to cut through the chopping conditions that we get here in New Zealand. It's probably the same in the UK and possibly some other countries. Not everywhere has clean waves and no wind. A lot of countries get wind affected, so you get a board that's too heavy, you feel all this bounce and chatter and chop, or the board's just a lot lighter. Sometimes a couple of these constructions that are not built to be ridiculously light are actually feel better in the water. I personally think the carbon wrap and the JS Hi-Fi are two of the better ones, and although it's ridiculously light, I actually find the feel of the Firewire Helium quite good as well. But when I first picked it up, I was like, oh, this is way too light for anything that's choppy, but it actually seems to, the way it flexes seems to actually deal with most conditions quite well, which is very surprising. So yeah, EPS core, and then obviously instead of your wooden stringer, they're using bands of carbon, and then the whole idea of the carbon wrap is like, this is your top stringer basically, and this is going to control the flex of the board. And then they've got these basically carbon, they're almost like little carbon mini seat belts, and those at the front they behave like a stringer but separated, and then as they come round to the tail, they're strategically placed to create a stiff and lively response under your foot, and then allow the tail behind that to flex and twang back and give you a lot of speed and pop. So these boards will feel really lively, and I think that's why a lot of people like them in smaller waves. When the waves are a bit gutless, these EPSs can really deliver you some of the zing that the wave's not got. So yeah, EPS core, this is actually Aero Blank, which I believe is a different density, and possibly even like one of these cores that's the cells are so close that they don't actually suck water up so much. So EPS core, and then you've got your normal glass cloth over it. You can even see the reinforcing layer here, and on the top, hard to see, but you'll see them on a lot of these boards. They've got this like more open crosshatch weave, or like linear weave that looks like a shedded snake skin or something, and that's actually a Negra. So that's a looser mesh of Negra, is almost like a plastic, or a plastic type material. It's almost like a Kevlar cloth, but in in more of a plastic based material. I shouldn't say plastic, I should say polymer, but same thing. It means the same thing, but it sounds less cheap. So that sort of pulls all the structure together, and putting the carbon in the right places gives you the stiffness and response and the twang, and that's what people are looking for out of modern EPS epoxy boards. So yeah, I think that's about all I probably need to say about that. It's a 5-fin board, actually works with both. I tend to ride quads more than anything, but this works fine with both. It's responsive, it's natural to surf, it didn't take much adjusting to, seemed to do everything quite well, fairly confidence inspiring, delivers a lot of speed. So yeah, I guess along the lines of daily driver that you just want to turn up in the car, and anything that's a couple of foot on a decent beach break and worth surfing is going to be okay at your lower end, and all the way up to, like, you probably really could ride head and a half. You could probably ride a decent 6 foot wave on this, no problem, I think, especially if it was PU. So again, I prefer PU. So if you're riding your appropriate volume, the nose isn't massive, the rocker's there. It's a little bit narrower than what I'm used to, but it didn't feel narrow, but it feels responsive on the turns, but it didn't feel wobbly. It's very stable. Yeah, really good all-round board. I can definitely highly recommend it. So again, it's like, if you're looking around and you don't want to spend $12.50 on a newie and you're looking at a daily driver, this is going to be the kind of thing you're looking at. It's probably going to be pitched in that I'd say this would have probably more range, and I probably feel more confident on this in a bigger wave, but I've not tried the new one. But I'd say it'd be in that wave category that people seem to be describing the new Firewire Dominator 2 as. I suspect this would be quite a similar board for most people, possibly even a bit more squirty in performance than the older Dominator, but again, depends on you personally. All great boards. So yeah, I'll whip round and show you through the concaves, because it's a really deep aggressive single, and it'll probably give you an idea of where you get some of that speed from. The rails are really nice. Rails are nearly sort of medium rail, plenty of tuck on the bottom, so it's going to be forgiving, but it's also going to perform quite well, and there's enough volume in there to carry you through turns and smaller waves, and carry you through flat sections. But it's refined enough that it's going to feel pretty good when you get a good turn off. So yeah, I'll pop round and show you the concaves. So here we go, guys, bottom contours on the V3 Rocket. As you'll see, it's the single starting up just under the nose where the rocker breaks, and where you're putting your weight on to start paddling, and you'll see just how deep that single's getting. We're about the halfway mark of the board now, and there's like, I don't know, there's probably very close to half an inch of concave there. It's normal to see a quarter's like kind of normal for a moderate concave. This is a very deep concave, and this is kind of about where your front foot would be, and that's really still very aggressive, and coming all the way through the tail. I don't even think there's any double in there, and again, as we're getting right towards the very end of the tail, you're pretty much just looking at single concave and lots of it all the way through the board. So I really think that's one of the things that helps this board develop so much speed for the outline and rocker. So as I say, overall, the V3 Rocket, it's basically a daily driver. Ride it from probably a couple of foot minimum, I'd say. You probably really want to be more like 3 foot, so probably chest high, and then ride it to well overhead if you want to do, but the happy spot's probably going to be chest to a bit overhead. You're probably going to be all right above that and below that. And great board, depending on the wave range and the type of waves you're looking for. I might personally choose this in the PU poly over the epoxy if I wanted to ride more of the higher wave range, and if you wanted to ride it performance in the lower end of the wave range, say heading a bit downwards, you might prefer the epoxy for that pop and liveliness. Yeah, that's the review. V3 Rocket, like I say, it's well worth looking at that old slightly older lost back catalogue, because there's some excellent boards out there that were excellent 3, 4, 5 to 8 years ago that are still excellent now. So don't write them off, and it might just give you an option that's in your price range. If you see something tidy that's a couple of years older, that's not necessarily the latest and greatest, but it might be perfect for you. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. And again, like I say, I'm really close to the 1,000 subscriber mark, so I would really appreciate it if people watching, they haven't subscribed, please subscribe. And if you know, I don't know, I don't mind who it is. If it's your son, your daughter, your brother, your grandma, your wife, your girlfriend, the guy from the corner shop, if you can just get a few people to just subscribe for a few weeks, it'll just push me through that 1,000 subscribers mark, and I'll be very grateful. All right, cheers, guys. I'll probably be doing some of my own boards again this year. Finished off 6 at the end of last year. You've probably seen most of the reviews of those. A lot of those are going really well. I'm really happy with how my shaping's come along, and the later ones, you know, the early ones were still pretty good really, but the later ones I really feel like I've sort of got the process down now. I'm refining stuff, and the glass jobs and the colours are coming out really good, and the you know, I'm just tweaking the concaves and the place that the hard edge comes into, and the tuck, and some of those features are starting to just tidy up the difference between the, you know, the earlier still very good, but like amateur shaper, and you know, it's getting them to look a bit more professional, which I'm really happy with. So hopefully you carry on and follow me on that journey, and I'll keep showing them as and when. Like I say, probably won't be getting as many of production boards to ride and review, because I've just got so many boards and I'm enjoying my own and the shaping and everything, and yeah, just not getting a chance to ride. You know, I've got too many boards that cover too many wave ranges basically. So all right, cheers, guys, thanks for watching, we'll catch you soon.